think of somebody today or tomorrow that you can encourage, or you can say something nice for, or even do something nice for without them even knowing it.
Absolutely.
That makes you feel good too.
Welcome to the Meyer Clinics podcast. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meyer Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us. Dr. Paul, I'm so glad that Chaz, my wonderful executive producer and my friend, introduced me to you. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's talk about first, I'm looking at like the order of things that you've done. And I'm trying to figure out what to start with first. The thing that is one of the standouts, because there's so many, is the PhD in meteorology.
Wow. Meteorology is really the only career where you can be wrong and still keep your job.
What in the world got you into that?
Well, that's a good question, Kristin. I was very interested in science and math as a youngster, and I would be on the front lawn of my house outside on a sunny day, just looking up at the sky above me. And there were good guys, which are the sun and the fair-weathered puffy clouds that dotted the sky like a painting. And there were bad guys, the thunderstorms and tornadoes that you want to rush indoors and be out of the weather. So it was a good guy, bad guy movie that was constantly playing above me. And I was fascinated by that. So I became interested in meteorology and in high school. And I eventually earned my PhD in meteorology. So I'm pretty excited about the weather. And
I bet.
It controls all of our lives.
Absolutely.
It's how fast we drive outside, how fast we walk, what kind of clothes we wear, whether we have our windshield wipers on. So that meteorology is really dominant over all of our lives.
Absolutely. So I've had the chance to speak to you just one-on-one. And what I found fascinating was how you got started doing public speaking and what role your mom played and also how old you were. So can you talk about those things?
Sure can. I was 10 years old in fourth grade. And my mom, she was a social worker in schools, 2 different schools. And she worked with troubled adolescents, trying to incorporate them or mainstream them into regular classrooms. And she realized that to successfully integrate them meant that all their other peers had to accept them as their own friends for their abilities. So my mom created a handicapped awareness program and invited me as a guest speaker. This was 1981. I was 10 years old, and I was very reluctant to speak in front of an audience I did not know. I thought they would tease me more than I would get teased in my own school. But all the students knew my mom because she worked at the school as a social worker. So when I went to school, everybody seemed to know me already. And that's how I got started speaking when I was 10 years old. I wasn't very good at it, but the more time I practiced, the better I became at it. And Mom and I would often go out for lunch. I did not want to go back to my school for the second half of the day. So I would try to delay her taking me back home to school. So we would go out for lunch, and I would always ask her, Mom, how can I make my assembly better? What do you do? What do you suggest I do to improve it? And that's not a question to ask your mother. You were wonderful.
Of course.
There's nothing I would change. I could not get any criticism out of her. So I started to criticize myself just a little bit to make the future ones that much more interesting to the audience. And over the next several years, I expanded the program to include disability awareness, anti-bullying, character education, peer leadership, overcoming adversity, and even substance abuse prevention.
I know I want to have you come on one of our shows on the network that's done by a hospital that works with kids that have autism. And so I wanted to ask you, because that's not much a part of what I've read on your site. Where does the autism piece fit in with you?
Well, I have a story to share. And during my presentations, I share stories. And one of them is very fascinating with a child I did not know who had autism. All right. Now, it's a sad story, but bear with me. It turns out very emotional and heartfelt. 2 years ago, my mom was on life support in the hospital, and my dad encouraged me to get some food as I had not eaten in several hours. All right. So I went to the Panera Bread next door, and I was having lunch alone. All right. At the time, my friend Yelena came in to the cafe with her 2 young sons. Her younger son, Zach, I'll call him Zach. He was about 6 years old. He walked up to me smiling. He walked up to my table smiling. All right. And it was so difficult for me to smile back. But I was proud to maintain my composure and not burst into tears. What Zach did was touch my arm very lightly, and it caused him to jump back like he was startled for some reason. And his expression changed from a smile to pure happiness, euphoria on his face. It was like an expression of pure happiness. I didn't understand it at the time, all right? But somehow, without using words, he already knew what I was facing, all right? My mom, she sadly passed away that same evening. Now, fast forward 1 year later, exactly 1 year later, Dad and I go to the cemetery to leave Mom a beautiful bouquet of flowers at her gravesite, a new gravestone. And after that, I was having a late breakfast at Panera again alone. All right. While I was having breakfast, I was overcome with sudden chills inside my body. And it was a feeling of intense warmth and goosebumps forming up my arms. I didn't know what was going on. My thoughts turned to my mom at that time. They were always with me every day, but more importantly, at that moment. And it turns out I said hello and told her she was greatly missed. When I finished breakfast, I spotted Yelena with her sons seated at another table behind me. So I was excited to see them. All right, Elena and Brian, her older son, were so excited to see me. Now, Zach was the opposite. He didn't want to look at me. He was face down. He put his palms over his face, like looking down, face down in the booth, not wanting to interact with me at all. Now, his mother and brother didn't know what was going on. I seemed to understand what may have been frustrating him. So I excused myself from the table, and while refilling my iced tea, I mentally asked my mom to please move away for the moment, because I think your ghostly presence is scaring the child. I returned to their table 1 minute later with my full iced tea, and Zach was back to his smiling and curious self. At that moment, I understood what happened. And Zach made me realize that a mother's love is eternal, is everlasting, and it never fades with time. And, when I think about children with autism, we always think they may be slow or challenged, but that's not true at all. It's us who are slow and challenged, not them. They are very advanced because they have their own unique abilities that we don't have.
In fact, 100%. I've witnessed that firsthand many times.
And what I believe happened is that Zach sensed a loving spiritual presence around me. Children with autism can detect love and optimism, and they're attracted to what would you call them? Auroras, like around people or objects of love and optimism.
Yeah, and someone's aura. Yeah, yep.
Auras, and they're repelled by anger or hostility, and they sense that around people, around objects, around homes. And we never learned how to understand the way they communicate. It's another unique aspect, because Zach looked me directly in the eyes for 15 seconds when I was having lunch. And I was thinking over and over the next several months what went on. And I finally realized that children with autism can communicate with their minds.
Oh, yes.
They communicate telepathically, but we never learned how to respond to them.
Isn't that interesting, Dr. Paul? Because I have had that experience myself, and it's like if people can't see it, if they can't see something, it isn't real for them. And I always think, oh my gosh, I mean, I have sat with many people with autism and had them read my mind. Like they knew what I was going to say before I said it, or they told me something that I was thinking that I had never shared with anybody.
Exactly. You have more experience with them. And this was my first experience with an autistic child. And it was fascinating. And I was drawn to him. And autism is not a disability at all. it's an ability, a capability.
Right.
And we should value those with any challenge at all. Because when we focus on our abilities, our disabilities fall into the background. They're not important at all. They're important in the fact that they instill in us the motivation and courage to realize our goals and dreams. And that's important for parents to understand as well.
Absolutely. I want to ask a question of Chaz, actually. I want to hear this from you, Chaz. How did you meet Dr. Paul? How did the two of you become good friends?
Well, Dr. Paul is actually from New Jersey, and that's where I am from and grew up. And it's funny. The past, I'm going to say about 5 years, I've known of him, but I never got to meet him. And I still, because of COVID-19, when COVID-19 lifts, Dr. Paul, we're going to go hang out. Okay. Absolutely. And I searched online high and low for a very long time, different speakers bureaus, trying to get my name out there, being a public speaker myself with disabilities. And Dr. Paul's website popped up an astronomical amount of times. I mean, it was every month I would look it up. His page would pop up all the time. And I'm like, I need to contact this man. So finally, after all those years, I connected with him on Facebook. And, we chatted that way for a couple of weeks. And then we're like, we need to have a FaceTime call, So we had a couple FaceTime calls. And it's just so intriguing because he's absolutely right. People with disabilities, to other people around us, it's a disability, but to us, it is. We're capable of more than and we have abilities that other people don't have, and we're superstars. We look to each other, we try to help each other, and it was great connecting with Dr. Paul on that level, that we actually spoke we became friends right away.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just amazing. We talked about my mom being a special ed teacher. He got into, he was talking about his mom. And it skyrocketed, and we just had great and amazing conversations since. And it's helped me because, he's such a motivator, and it's helped me stay motivated through the tough times that I go through. And, that's someone we all need, So.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to congratulate you, Dr. Paul, on receiving in September of 2020. I mean, it's October, so this is very recent. It says Senate Award, but what's the long name for what you just received?
Okay, thank you very much for your compliments, Kristin. It was a New Jersey Senate Award from the New Jersey Senator Vin Gopal. Mm-hmm. I met Vin about 20 years ago at Rutgers. And it's interesting because when I was at Rutgers, I would eat at the dining hall. And I would go into the dining hall carrying my food, and I would search around, look at all the tables around me, and choose to sit with somebody I did not know who was eating alone. because I knew what it felt like to eat alone. And I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. So I would ask them about their hobbies, their major, their interests, their hometown, because we were all in the same university, the same college. And for 4 years, we had the same zip code. But why were we so different? Why did we form cliques when we should not have? So I would make friends with them, and that's how I made friends with Ben. And I sat down with him, and he has such fascinating ideas for improving our lives collectively that I knew he was destined for great things. And now he's a New Jersey state senator of District 11, which is in Monmouth County.
Fantastic.
And he awarded me a proclamation for a 40-year speaking career educating others about our disabilities.
Yeah, because when you start at 10 years old,
yeah,
it's a long career.
It's a long period, but it doesn't seem long because
Right.
I'm very happy when I'm in front of an audience or in front of students or professionals or teachers or educators or parents. You know, whatever the audience is, as long as I have a microphone, I'm home. I feel at home.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meyer of the Meyer Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meyer Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Now, haven't you also written a book?
I'm writing a book right now.
Okay, that's what it
draft
was.
Stage.
Okay. I mean, there's no limit to what you have been able to do. So the whole I can't do anything because I have a disability, you've squashed that times 1,000.
Exactly. When you rip the T out of the word can't, what are you left with?
Can.
Yes, I can.
I love it.
And that's very important for everyone to understand. It's our abilities that make us special, not our disabilities.
How have you seen, and let me start it with an example. I've been in mental health for a long time personally, and then also professionally. And I've seen how the stigma around mental illness and the term mental health have certainly changed. It's certainly gotten better out there. What have you seen in the world of disabilities in terms of the bullying, the lack of understanding, the people talking to you or anyone else like they're not intelligent, sentient beings? I mean, how, because I have to preface it with this too. I grew up with a grandmother who was a foster grandparent. So so this is what I was surrounded with. I was always with the kids that she was working with. This was normal for me. So I never thought anything of it, but I always witnessed with much pain how the rest of the world would treat whatever kids I was with. And that was really hard because I was a pretty sensitive kid. So that was really hard for me to witness. So how have you seen things get better, maybe get worse over the years? Because you've been in this a long time and you've had your quote unquote disabilities your whole life.
When I was in high school, a ninth grader, I was sitting in the lunchroom in the cafeteria having lunch with my friends. I did not see the senior jock coming up behind me. He's a big guy. He actually lifts me up into the air and dumps me in the wheeled garbage bin, and then parades me around the cafeteria while it was in the garbage bin. I didn't want to stoop down to his level. All right. He may have felt pride for what he did, was doing, but I didn't want to stoop down to his level. I wanted to bring him up. So after that happened, I went to my principal and I explained to him what went on in the cafeteria. But I added, please don't get the jock in trouble. Don't punish him. So I did not know this. My principal suspended him for 3 days. 24 years later, he finds me on Facebook. The jock finds me on Facebook. Doesn't add me as a friend. Instead, he sends me a profound apology as a message, apologizing for his actions all those years ago.
Oh, wow.
Because he has kids now, and he understands that what he did was so cruel. And he ended the message by saying, Paul, if you forgive me, please add me as a friend. So he didn't add me, he asked me to add him. I smiled and I clicked add friend. You know why? People can change when we become educated about the differences we all share. And those differences should be celebrated, never ridiculed. And you know what the favorite part of the story is? Forgiveness. When you forgive someone, you're releasing all that anger, all that hate, all that frustration, and you're just letting it go. It's not bothering you anymore.
Right.
And it allows you to become happier, hopeful, and the world just seems better when you forgive someone. So forgiveness is never a sign of weakness. It is always a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
And
with everything,
I think as mental health, if people have any type of adversity, the first thing that they should do is forgive someone who wronged them in the past. Their world becomes lighter and brighter.
Very true.
And happier. And then try to educate others. And that's exactly what you're doing, Kristin and Chaz. And I appreciate that. Because you are educating others about what they can do instead of what they can't do.
I think, Dr. Paul, I mostly educate people on how annoying I am, but that's a whole other thing.
Stop. You don't.
They have to listen to me. I'm the constant on every show. And I'm like, oh my God, some people have listened for 8 years. I don't even want to listen to myself that long. But anyway, so you've seen it get better, Dr. Paul. I mean, you've seen kind of have you seen some change with all of the, anti-bullying campaigns and the mental health awareness and the disability awareness? You've seen it get a little bit better, you think?
Yes, I have. But social media has brought another perspective into this. Bullying is typically less physical now and more social media because people hide behind a computer.
Yeah.
And sadly, they hide behind a computer. So I've tried to break the stigma by reaching through the screen virtually. These days in the COVID world, it's now virtually. I could open hearts and minds by reaching through the screen and capturing that, creating that emotional bond with listeners. And that's exactly what you are doing.
Yeah, it's what we're all trying to do. I mean, that's amazing. Life would not be how much I enjoy it if I wasn't doing exactly this,
Did I mention that I have cerebral palsy?
I was following the instructions of let's talk about all the things that you do, and then we'll go, and don't ever say that you can't do anything, because now listen to Dr. Paul talk about cerebral palsy.
Yeah, well, that's important. I may have cerebral palsy, but the cerebral palsy doesn't need to have me.
Right. Very humble. So in education around things like cerebral palsy, because again, my friends were kids that had things like cerebral palsy. So I didn't think anything of it, but it was the world's reaction to it that was so shocking. So when you break a lot of doors down when you just show up and speak, because that takes some guts. And I'm sure when you're there, in fact, I know when you're there and you're speaking, any other kid that's there that themselves have cerebral palsy, or a sibling or a friend, you're just opening the minds of so many people. So do you still you're welcome. Do you still get that kind of rush when you go up on stage and you do a talk and you see when they get it?
Well, I love the questions that I get from the audience, because the questions are usually profound. Some of the young students who are in maybe 4th grade, 3rd grade, or even middle school, they come up to me and said, asked me a question: how does it feel to jump out of a plane? Because I share a video with them, and the video has some of my skydiving, scuba diving activities, my paintings, and I answer that question with honesty and humor. And my response is, I didn't jump out of the plane. I was pushed out. And when I'm pushed out of a plane at 13,000 feet, flying at 13,000 feet, my first reaction was pure happiness. I felt like I did not have cerebral palsy anymore. I was falling at 200 feet a second.
Oh my gosh.
For 1 minute. You can't scream. I wanted to scream and yell joy, but I could not scream. I had to keep my mouth firmly shut to prevent myself from choking on air.
Yes, exactly. Or whatever bug happens to just right there. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Big dog. And I loved it. I didn't tell my parents for a whole month that I was pushed out of a plane.
Oh my gosh.
And then I waited a big family reunion. My cousins, my sister, my little brothers were there. And I shared with them the video, watched their expressions, and I loved it. I did it again the following summer, but it wasn't the same. So I'd rather keep my feet on the ground.
I hear you. I want to make sure our listeners know where they can find out more about you and have you do virtual, or when we have a vaccine for COVID, come back and do in-person speaking events. So please share with my listeners where they can find you.
All right. I'll be happy to. I have designed my own website. It's the name of my favorite Billy Joel song, www.justthewayouare.com.
Great domain.
And that is my favorite Billy Joel song. I have pictures with Billy Joel on the website, and I have a photo gallery. A TED Talk is on the website. Viewers are encouraged to watch my TED Talk and read about the description of my assemblies. I speak in person and virtual, and my programs are generally very uplifting. They're funny, but they're insightful.
Yes, they are. Thank you so much for coming on my show.
Thank you very much. And remember, never let your attitude become a disability.
And there's one more that I have to share that I love. I'm going to your homepage here. Taking the dis out of disability. I love that.
Thank you.
Jazz, thank you so much for the introduction and for joining me.
Oh, of course, Kristin. It was a pleasure as always.
And listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meyer Clinics, please visit our website at meyerclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.